The title of this session is The Disruptors, Metabolic Power, Need It, Want It. I'm not exactly sure what this means, but hopefully we can find out as the panel goes on, and it will be about metabolism. So again, my name is Alex Stranahan. I'm Senior Analyst covering SMID Biotech at Bank of America. And maybe we can just go down the row and give our introductions, please.
I'm Carolina Povian. I am a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and co-director of the Center for Weight Management and Wellness at the Brigham and Women's Hospital.
David Hyman, thanks for having me for the second session, Chief Medical Officer at Eli Lilly.
And Xiaoyang Cho, I'm the founding CEO for Rigor Pharmaceutics.
My name is Harith Rajagopalan. I'm a cardiologist. I did my internal medicine and fellowship training at the Brigham, but now I'm co-founder and CEO of Fractal Health, a biotech company focused on addressing root causes of obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Fantastic. Well, maybe we can kick things off. I think GLP-1s are kind of a household name at this point, but maybe we can just start with the current state of metabolic management, maybe focusing on obesity to begin with, and how bariatric surgery was the beginning, but now we're moving over to therapeutics as well. Maybe David, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit in the last session. It's exciting and gratifying to have the opportunity to offer patients with overweight and obesity non-surgical options for the management of their chronic health condition. I think we're focused on demonstrating this is a treatable disease associated with preventable complications. Obviously, we have one medicine now marketed to do that. We're working on scaling that through oral non-peptide agonists, small molecules that we could scale even more. We're working on innovating with next generation molecules that are triagonists that agonize multiple peptides and deliver bariatric level weight management. And the scale of these clinical programs is sort of unprecedented for our company.
That is great. However, we need to remember that 10 years ago, we didn't have the explosion in these molecules. We learned everything about them, or almost everything, from metabolic bariatric surgery, which is still a very effective way to change the secretion of multiple gut hormones and elicit, through laparoscopic surgery, a reduction in the body weight set point by 80 to 100 pounds with a maintenance of that weight loss. And in the United States, we do 250,000 procedures per year. We have about 11 to 15 million Americans who are eligible for bariatric surgery. And the disparity in those getting this kind of treatment has to do with not the misunderstanding of obesity to be a matter of willpower and not the disease that it is. And so we're hoping to change the practice of medicine with these new medications to treat the obesity first, to see it as the disease that it is, and not only to have multidisciplinary treatment, including diet, exercise, medications, but also metabolic bariatric surgery.
Wondering if, Xiaoyang, you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so I work on the cardiovascular metabolic disease area for 20 years. So the explosion of GLP-1 is nothing short of a miracle. Quite honestly, Rigor is a very young company, founded 6 years ago. Even 6 years ago, when we worked on GLP-1, we thought about diabetes. We were not thinking about obesity. Just the data from Lilly and Novo and everybody just amazing, right? So it's a great opportunity. Obesity drug discovery used to be a graveyard. There's so many failures, very little success. So this is really change the world. So what we start the company thinking is how we can do further that. So by the time we start our program, we decide we're not going to play with peptide and biologics because we're going to be way too late, right? So what's the book? The book is that we see GLP-1 and weight management to be a lifelong disease. So you need people to be able to use that for a long time. Actually, Lilly data shows if you stop it, the weight goes back. And Caroline yesterday said, if you start it again, it's going to be harder to lose the weight, right? So in that regard, we really want in the future to have a lifelong solution. There are many previous successful examples, such as statins for cardiovascular disease. From 91 to 2011, 20 years, the deaths by heart disease reduced by 46%. That's the kind of impact we would like to see in obesity. That's why we focus on small molecule oral GLP-1s, as David mentioned about.
That's great, and I think that sets the stage nicely to now talk about what's next, right? I think we all understand the impact GLP-1s could have on all of our lives, but are we going to stop there? It sounds like there's still some efficacy left on the table. There's maybe some safety aspects as well that could be solved for, and the convenience aspect with orals. So, Harith, maybe you can talk about sort of what's coming up the pipe and the problems we're trying to solve.
Sure, thanks. I'm happy to. The way I think about metabolic care, I think of 3 core pillars that need to be addressed for a patient. One of them is diet and lifestyle. That's clearly important, but we also know it's insufficient because people's metabolic set point is altered and their body fights against the diet and lifestyle that they try to impose. We have amazing new pharmacologies now from Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk that are very potent, and they can modulate the metabolic set point. But one of the challenges that we're observing is that a lot of people are discontinuing these drugs, and of the sets of unmet needs that one could choose to pursue in this conversation, I think the one that's perhaps most striking is that 2/3 of patients with obesity who start taking GLP-1 drugs stop taking them within 1 year. So we have incredible data, phase 3 evidence on improvements in not only glucose and body weight, but also incredible data on hard endpoints. But a majority of people who start taking these drugs stop taking them before they can see any long-term benefit from them. And so we are focused on that problem of weight maintenance. And we have 2 approaches that are focused on trying to alter the body's metabolic set point in a less invasive way than surgery, in a much more scalable way that could offer durable long-term weight maintenance, which is what we think is necessary to translate the incredible power and promise of the drugs and what they're demonstrating in clinical trials into actually impacting the real world in a more meaningful way. Because I think what we're seeing is that only a minority of people are actually going to stay on the drug for the rest of their lives, no matter what type of formulation we give it in. What do we do for the patients left behind, those who will not stay on medicines and yet need long-term benefit? That's what we've been focused on.
David, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on sort of how you've thought about GLP-1s and now the dual agonists and sort of their role in the space, and how you're building upon that with the triple and other approaches.
Yeah, we have a sort of a number of different strategies to build on our Zepbound, our dual GLP-1, GIP agonists. I mentioned, so one is we recognize that although we're doing incredible job of scaling access to this medicine, it's still a complex parenteral synthetic peptide injected device, and given the sort of scale of the need across the world, we think a lot of need could just be addressed by a scalable oral small molecule. That's our orforglipron program, sort of similar to the approach that's being pursued at Rigor. I think another is there'll be patients who we recognize that even the dual agonist is not going to entirely meet their weight loss needs or other metabolic needs. I've referred to a triagonist that also includes glucagon agonism called retatrutide that's in late phase development, and hope to see that drug be available to patients in the next couple years. But moving beyond that, we're looking at a variety of other gut hormones and peptides to understand their role in improving cardiometabolic health. We're also have a large research program on quality of weight loss, using drugs like an activin inhibitor, which may shift sort of the quality of the weight loss to be more focused on the adipose compartment. We really think about adiposity as the disease. And I think overall the recommendations of the field are to move more towards looking at adiposity as the issue, not BMI or total body weight. So we're looking at that as well, and then other modalities to sort of modulate these in a longer term way. So it's a comprehensive approach. Obviously, like the innovation that's being offered by the currently approved product is large, but we're not stopping there, and we're sort of taking an all of the above approach, if you will, to offer various treatments to patients. And the other thing I should say is that I think we're used to thinking about this, and be interested to hear more of your perspective on this. We're used to thinking of these sort of marketplaces as like there's one patient. But we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, and these are, like every patient has their own needs, has their own comorbid illnesses, and I think there'll be a lot of personalization of treatment, and there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, so it's sort of incumbent on us to generate multiple mechanisms of action that are clinically validated, approved, and available for patients, and recognize that there'll be individual selection factors and sort of treatment decisions made on the individual patient level. So that's just in a nutshell sort of how we're thinking about this complex space.
I can add to that. That's really great, and the innovation in pharmaceuticals is really truly amazing. In addition, now we know that with GLP-1s, we're not really addressing body composition, and that's where activins and myostatin antagonists are coming in, because we know that it's very, very hard in this society to exercise and eat a high-protein diet and do resistance exercise training. However, that's still important, and when I look in the future, I see a real multidisciplinary program for obesity, much as we have now for cancer treatment and even cardiovascular disease. So I like to think about this as an analogous to those two diseases, because they're diseases and they're recognized to be diseases. And when your cardiologist tells you you need a stent, you don't say, oh, I don't want that, doc. I know I can do it on my own. Like we see this every single day in obesity medicine practices where the patient's BMI is 45 or 50, and we offer a metabolic bariatric procedure, and the first thing we hear is, don't talk to me about surgery. And I believe it's because of the precedent in the past that surgical procedures were aggressive, that people died, and that people regained the weight back. The procedures today are such that you're in the hospital one night, the operation lasts less than 2 hours, and you lose 100 pounds in a year. And you change multiple gut hormones and not just one. And then the other thing is that on top, bariatric surgery doesn't work for everyone. There is weight loss. Most of the time it's between 25 and 35% total body weight loss, which is great, but there's often a weight regain, just like there's a restenosis rate after stent placement. And that is where we see the role of GLP-1 agonists and other pharmaceuticals coming into play as well. But I think we have to do better than 250,000 procedures per year. And you know what? I'm not a surgeon, so I have no skin in this game except to see patients get the care that they need.
I'd like to build on that. As a person who trained in cardiology, I think that one of the beautiful things about cardiovascular medicine is that cardiologists have an opportunity to see patients with coronary disease, to offer them medical therapy and cardiac rehabilitation as appropriate, to offer them a cardiac surgery under certain circumstances, and to offer them percutaneous approaches that are less invasive but more scalable than surgery. and then to observe from patients what it is that they prefer in their choice of care. And invariably, medicines are an important part of everyone's cardiovascular care journey, but many patients choose angioplasty, and some patients choose or require surgery. And that implementation science within cardiovascular medicine has been going on for multiple decades now. We have bariatric surgery, as Caroline mentions, and that exists, but it probably penetrates, what, 1% of the bariatric eligible patient population. We now have some great medicines, and we're focused on developing the thing that sits in between, the percutaneous, less invasive approach that could be the corollary to angioplasty for obesity and metabolic disease. And then I think we're going to need to figure out how to organize ourselves, like comprehensive cancer centers have or cardiovascular care has, to work out the implementation science to figure out which patients require which combination of therapies, because I actually don't think anyone would do well with any one of them alone. It's always going to require a combination of approaches. And yet we are just in day one of trying to figure all of that out.
Maybe I can add to that. So take the cardiovascular, right? So I used to collaborate with Michael Brown, who says LDL as low as possible. So there's no reason for people to get to BMI 45 and start treatment. Honestly, my dream is that when you get to my weight, 5%, 10% exercise, healthy, that's probably a good start. If you have a medicine that's well tolerated, give you, clinical, meaningful efficacy, why not start early, right? Why do you wait until you get 45? I think there's a place always for those severely obese people. But if you really care about obesity as a disease or pandemic, you need to treat it early, and we need to develop those tools for that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the probably more important research endeavors happening at the company right now, as it pertains to cardiometabolic health, it doesn't get a lot of attention, and it's slow work, appropriately so, is the work we're doing in younger patients, adolescents, for example, with obesity, and really understanding the long-term health consequences of early intervention. Because we know that these younger children can develop the early signs of cardiovascular disease, and we're seeing this manifest, multiple complications of cardiovascular disease, MASH, liver disease. Obviously, in the pediatric community, I think there's a caution about the concept of putting people on medicines for long periods of time, even potentially their whole lives, appropriately so, and it's incumbent on us to generate those data. We're doing so carefully. We're planning to run long studies. But I think actually, when you think about the sort of shifting epidemic of obesity and the role for pharmaceutics in that, it's potentially profound. And so that's work that we're engaged in now. Again, it doesn't drive the bottom line by any means. It's not the sort of commercial focus externally as we have these interactions. But scientifically, I think it's incumbent on us as a large player in this space to do that work methodically and carefully and with the right amount of caution. I think we're doing that.
No, those are great points. And if I could take the liberty to make a halftime synopsis of what we've talked about, and the title of this chat is starting to make a little bit more sense to me, but we've talked about the patient groups that need weight loss, GLP-1s, bariatric surgery. We talked about pediatrics. We talked about the obese population. And then there's the rest of us, right, that may want to lose a little bit of weight and are looking for a way to do that. But Caroline, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, since you treat a number of obesity patients through your clinic at Brigham Women's. But what is, David mentioned that no patient is necessarily unique. They're all unique. They're not necessarily the same. What are you sort of seeing in terms of patient needs, and how do you stratify patients?
It's a great question, and yes, you're right. Everybody's an individual. There are indeed some patients who come in who have been trying to eat healthy and exercising, but let's face it, what we have is a disease that is really caused by our environment, interacting with our genetics. So we really truly believe that. We have some good data to show that when you develop obesity, there is a dysfunction, probably caused by inflammation, somewhere along the gut to the brain. So this is a neurometabolic disease that affects the brain in such a way that inflammation is causing a lack of penetration of gut hormones, indicating satiety, and bolstered by signals coming from fat tissue going to the brain saying, I'm starving, and we're all defending a higher body weight set point. That's why obesity is a disease. Some people really don't have this disease, and with a few lifestyle changes can, through lifestyle and maybe a GLP-1 for a little while, go down 20, 30 pounds. If they meet the criteria for a GLP-1, which is BMI over 30, over 27 with a condition. We know that from the National Weight Control Registry. There are patients, 10,000 of them, who've lost 50 pounds, kept it off without any medication. They are on a low-calorie, healthy diet. They weigh themselves every morning, and they exercise 2,500 calories worth per week. If they stop doing any of these things, they start to regain weight, because the brain remembers. You really, that's the definition of obesity as a disease, but you're in this environment. So what I'm talking about is people who truly have the disease of obesity, which means that that inflammation is probably never going to go away. And we also have good evidence that that's the case from animal models. If that's the case, we have a disease, and then yes, those medications you're going to be on forever, but you're on lisinopril if you have hypertension forever, and you're on any medication for any other disease forever, and no one says anything about that. And I think that the problem with GLP-1s not being used indefinitely may have to do more with shortages and insurance lack of coverage than really the patient stopping the medication. That's what I really think is happening. Because unlike hypertension and drugs for glucose, you see what it is doing. You feel what it's doing. You feel the satiety. You don't want to get off that medication, even if it's an injectable.
I have to say that I would agree with you, except for the experience in cardiovascular disease, because statins are essentially asymptomatic for the vast majority of people. And even in secondary prevention of cardiovascular disease, 50% of people stop taking statins within 6 to 12 months. So the question is obesity going to be different than that because people see it and feel it? And I think that one may hope that that's true, but I don't think we have the evidence to support that, honestly. The payer, Blue Cross Blue Shield put something out in May or June saying that the average persistence to GLP-1 therapy is 90 to 180 days. I spoke to a payer in the room today who said that in their panel, in a state that will not be mentioned, that they're seeing 70% of people stop taking GLP-1s within 6 months. And that alone would not be a problem, but for tying that into the magnitude of the weight that is lost, and then the magnitude of the weight that is at risk of being regained in some individuals, and the body composition changes that may or may not be associated with that. And there is an interesting conundrum for manufacturers, because the more effective the drug is at weight loss, the more potential questions arise around the weight regain that may occur in people who cannot or do not continue on the medicine for one reason or another. So, for that reason, I have to say that I do think that this problem of durable weight loss maintenance is, in my view, the biggest problem in the field. I think that the drugs that exist are incredibly potent, and it would be wonderful if everyone took them every day. Bariatric surgery is incredibly effective. It would be great if we could wave a magic wand and offer bariatric surgery to 25 million Americans, or 100 million Americans, and we unfortunately can't do that for even a tiny fraction of it. And so the implementation of durable real-world results is going to require new approaches, in my view. And those are approaches that don't exist today, but that's what our focus is.
I wonder if David or Xiao.
Yeah, maybe I add an element to that. So you mentioned the report, right? So there's well known that payers are hesitant to pay for everything, including employees. If you just have obesity without diabetes, they're very reluctant to pay for it, right? There's ongoing debate. We are probably on this side of the equation, but there are many people on the other side of the equation. But there's less argument if you have a cardiovascular deposition or you have other tendency to get disease. And if you've been diagnosed even for diabetes, you tend to stay longer for that treatment because you know that's a disease, right? And the payer is much more willing to pay for it. And you are working with a specialist, she's gonna say, stay on it, otherwise you're gonna have big consequences. So one other thing from clinical studies that weight loss and cardiovascular benefit are not hand to hand. This is well studied, right? People don't even lose weight, but they improve cardiovascular health. So I think there's a lot new science to be learned, not new trial needs to be continued to really hit that home. GLP-1 is a phenomenal target. The other side, I think we see is that when you start to work in drug discovery, choosing a target, you're working on a target. Once you pick a molecule, the target is no longer relevant. Every molecule has its differentiations. So certain molecules perhaps cause a little bit less weight loss, but they have a huge cardiovascular benefit. It is possible. We've seen plenty of examples of that. So I think, we're not talking about competition here. I think the field is big enough for everybody to do a lot of work, invest, and see, when you have 200 million people need their therapy, people are gonna be different. And there may be a place and solutions for each group of people, depends on your needs.
Yeah. No, I think these are great points, and certainly the affordability and availability piece is something that wasn't lost on the audience members either. We got a few questions here that I want to make sure I get to. Thank you for submitting your questions on the affordability piece. Maybe David, if you could speak to this, how do you sort of see the payer access piece coming together? Obviously, this is a new market you and Novo have been building out, but any insights into how the future landscape may evolve in terms of improving access and affordability to these therapies?
Yeah, obviously it's something we spend a lot of time on. I think there's a couple different things going on here. I think, ironically, I think for almost any other therapeutic area that had demonstrated the magnitude of benefit of these agents, we'd have sort of universal access. I think the reason that we're not quite there yet is predominantly because this affects such a wide swath of the population that people are struggling with sort of the impact on healthcare system budgets. We're not really having a debate about the value of the medicine. If anything, it's sort of the opposite. These medicines are so good and they have the potential to benefit so many patients that we have to figure out how to manage that. Obviously, we have a role to play in that. We've taken a number of different approaches to managing patients' out-of-pocket costs, introducing different forms of the medicine. We recently introduced vials that have a differential pricing associated with them. Obviously, we hope to bring on orals that will have a different price point because of the complexity, obviously, of the products versus the parenteral injectables. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're seeing increased access. One of the interesting things I think we're beginning to see in this space actually is employers making the decision to opt in to coverage because they see the benefits to their workforce, their well-being and their productivity, which we're beginning to show with these medicines. And I think the last thing I'll just say is that there's a lot of focus on the cost of these medicines, appropriately so, but of course the cost of not treating these conditions is absolutely enormous. I think there was just estimates today that we spend as a society somewhere in the vicinity of $400 billion on direct obesity-related complications. and closer to $1 trillion in indirect cost of these annually. And I think we would expect that that would be significantly curtailed if we were intervening in the underlying conditions. So I think we're sort of in the early innings of this. We're seeing increased access. We haven't talked about the federal government has a unique approach on this, but obviously as we demonstrate more hard endpoints with these therapies, we're increasing access there as well. So we're on the right path, but I think it's ironically, again, the magnitude of benefit of these medicines, the number of patients who could benefit is really, I think, why we're actually seeing some of the hang-ups here. Yeah.
I think there's going to be two trends, and it's hard to know exactly how they're going to intersect with one another. Clearly, the cost of the medicines weighs heavily on plans that are looking on an annualized basis, and that's a concern. I would say that the cost of the drugs is going to come down, obviously, as we move to small molecules and as IRA begins to negotiate on price. And then conversely, you're going to have more real-world evidence on the impact of these drugs and the potential cost offset that we would see. And I think the question is going to be, how do those two interplay with one another in order to inform access, pricing, and formularies in the coming years? I think that it's hard to know exactly how those two are going to play out against one another. I do think that the perspective on hard endpoints is going to be important to realize in the real world for payers to embrace this. But I think, and I don't know if we've seen that yet, but I'm looking forward to that data.
This is great, and I just want to let you all know what we're doing on the medical subspecialty end to move this forward. We have developed a subspecialty in medicine called obesity medicine, and we have also helped spur the development of obesity medicine fellowships in academic centers around the country, and we are training about 25 to 30 new obesity medicine specialists per year to take the American Board of Obesity Medicine examination. These are people who are internal medicine, family practice, who now know how to treat obesity. Certainly, there's not enough out there to really be able to utilize the new medications the way they should be utilized, and we still have an issue with primary care providers not having the resources in their practice to treat the obesity first. Some of the issues are lack of nutrition training. What do? You just hand the patient a prescription, but you also have to talk about lifestyle. Doctors are not trained like that in medical schools yet. But on top of that, the prior authorization process to get these very expensive medications covered by insurance is onerous. And so those two things have to be ameliorated in order for primary care practitioners around the country to be able to treat the obesity first. We are developing standards of care in obesity medicine through the Obesity Society to help primary cares do this. But I can tell you, it's not like treating, it's not like treating another disease. You don't just hand the patient a prescription and see them in 6 months. You have to monitor for, of course, side effects, but most importantly, adherence to a lifestyle change that will help the medication do its best. And these new medications help alter your preference for healthy food. And actually, I have had patients tell me, Doc, this GLP-1 is helping me eat salad and go to the gym. And that's exactly what it's doing, because it's hitting not just the homeostatic energy regulation system in the brain, but also the reward pathway. And that's what makes this so exciting. And we can also talk about how the whole society is going to change. We already have places like Walmart and other fast food restaurants realizing that people are out there not wanting to eat that ultra-processed food anymore. It's going to take 5 to 10 years, but we're going to see our entire society changing because of GLP-1s, and I applaud the Lasker Prize for congratulating those 3 scientists who helped make this happen.
I mean, I think that's a great wrap up of sort of the challenges that we face today. You know, we talked about building out a brand new market, and one that's this large. It takes a Herculean effort to get the ball rolling, and I think the GLP-1s were a big push for that. But like you said, Caroline, there's a lot that needs to be done before obesity even sets in terms of nutritional planning and just awareness around good eating. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to go down the panel. You know, we talked about oral GLP-1s. In my sense, given the kind of the issues we've seen with Roche and recently Novartis for their GLP-1s, it's maybe not a straight shot up beyond what we have currently. So maybe starting at the end, we can talk about you know, over the next 5 years, where you see sort of the space evolving on the therapeutic side.
Okay, I'm happy to start. I think that over the next 5 years, we're going to see more molecules offered that affect more mechanisms, that are all going to have improvements in some of the unmet needs that we've talked about today. There are going to be greater potency, there's going to be different distribution of muscle versus fat loss. I think that all of these medicines are going to improve the profile of what medicines can offer, and I think that they're all going to fundamentally also require ongoing medical therapy for their benefits. And I think the question is, like, how many people will stay on the drug long enough for people to actually have real clinical meaningful benefits from it. I think that bariatric surgery has been at 250,000 patients for a very, very long time now. I think it's really hard to see how that number grows dramatically or meaningfully compared to what we have from the medical therapies, or sorry, compared to what we have today. And I would like to say that we're going to have more scalable disease-modifying approaches that target Caroline's mention of the gut-brain axis endoscopically in ways that can be able to modulate the metabolic set point in a more durable manner in order to complement the medicines that people take and the diet and lifestyle interventions that we know they need. The more we can do to make it easier for people to abide by diet and lifestyle, the better we're going to be in moving the curve of the trajectory of the disease. And so the medicines, I think, are an important part in that, but they're insufficient. But asking everyone to just diet and exercise is awfully hard because they're fighting against their own physiology. We need new tools that can modulate the metabolic set point, that can make it easier for people to live in the world that our industrialized revolution has created for us. You know, in the 20th century, we, by and large, the food industry solved the problem of poverty. In the 40s and 50s, you know, right after World War II, there were still Northern European countries that were suffering from famine. And we hardly hear about famine in countries that aren't hit by war or political strife anymore, because we've reduced the cost per calorie, we've improved distribution around the world to such a great extent. But we're humans that are built for scarcity. We're living in a world of abundance. And I think that that world of abundance, hopefully, will not stop, because the consequence of losing the world of abundance is much more severe than the benefit of having that world of abundance. So we need a way to be able to make ourselves be able to live in that world without suffering the metabolic consequences. And the only way I can think to do that is by helping ourselves alter our metabolic set point back to a place where we're not craving the things that are getting us into trouble.
Interesting. Jiayang?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that anymore. I think all the efforts to raise awareness that obesity could have severe consequences, and the solution is not just taking medicine, but it really needs to manage the lifestyle, everything else, and with the tools hopefully successful in the clinical trials, the patient will have more options and the physician will have more options, then we fundamentally solve this problem.
David?
I'll be quick. I think we'll have a couple things. One is, I think we'll, as a society, have really now well understood and changed the stigma associated with obesity and classified it along other chronic diseases like hypertension and diabetes. I think that will do a great service to people suffering from this. I think we'll have much more wide-scale availability of these medicines through a variety of forms. And I think we'll have a much more comprehensive understanding of the healthcare benefits of them, in addition to preventing major cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes, improving heart failure, improving kidney outcomes, preventing diabetes. I think we'll have probably 5 or 10 additional obesity-related complications on that list as being prevented, treated, or modified with these therapies. So I think we'll just have more data to support their effectiveness overall.
Caroline?
Okay, I'll be quick. So we need to fully go to the finish line with understanding obesity to be a disease. We still don't, because what I can tell you is that metabolic bariatric surgery has been shown, not in randomized controlled clinical trials, but has been shown in long-term databases to reduce mortality, all-cause mortality, by 20%. If you compare that to stent placement for angina, 7 years of stent plus medication versus medication alone, 0 difference in mortality. Yet we do hundreds of thousands of stents per year and only 250,000 procedures for bariatric surgery per year. We have a big disconnect there. And then number 2, yes, we have a worldwide, 1 billion people in the world have obesity. And the CEO of Dunkin' Donuts once told me, you know, Dr. Apovian, we feed the world sugar and white flour. And that's how we got into this mess. And yes, in the future, in order to prevent obesity, we have to do something about the environment that we're living in. But in order to do that, we have to figure out how to feed people something other than sugar and white flour.
I kind of want a donut now, but thank you for the great discussion.